are you? And where are you going? What do you want?
Hello and welcome to People Making Money. I'm your host, Kevin Bemmel, and I'm here every Wednesday at 10 a.m. Pacific time to talk about job hunting, starting and building a business, building wealth, the whole financial side of life. And today is my monthly economic echoes, where we break down the monthly economic data and talk about how it's going to affect your economy, because none of us live the national economy. We all live our own individual lives. This is always a jam-packed show, so I'm going to get right into sharing the data. And we always start out by looking at the consumer price index. And oops. I've been good about remembering to shut my email, but every once in a while I forget. So the consumer price index for May went up 0.1%. And seasonally adjusted, and it rose 2.4% over the last 12 months, not seasonally adjusted. Okay, and you can see that there you go. There's the 2.4% year over year. So 0.1% in May, if we were to annualize that, which isn't exactly the right way to do it, but because it does vary obviously from month to month, but 0.1% would be 1.2% on an annualized basis. Certainly that would be well within the Federal Reserve Bank's Federal Reserve Board's target, which is 2%. Even at the unadjusted annual rate of 2.4%, where you can see that the CPI, Consumer Price Index, is pretty close to where the Federal Reserve Board, where their target is. And this, the May rate, ostensibly is taking into account some of the effects of the volatility in prices caused by the levying of tariffs. Of course, that was a somewhat tumultuous time. Tariffs were levied, they were changed, they were taken off, some were reimposed. But it doesn't appear that in the end that had much of an impact, at least in terms of overall consumer prices. Now, we'll see, going forward into June and July, although economically things have calmed down, I think, significantly over the last few weeks. And so, we'll see if there's more tumult to come. The president is, when all is said and done, much more of a practical individual than an ideologue. And so my supposition is that he will tamp down the volatility if he can, because that doesn't serve his purposes. But we'll have to see what happens there. So you can see that the overall rate is 2.4%. Food went up 2.9%. That was offset by energy decreasing 3.5%. So the rate on all categories less food and energy is 2.8%, okay, which is the so-called core inflation rate. So let's drill down now. So food at home went up 2.2%. Food away from home went up 3.8%. That's continuing a months long trend. Eating out is getting ever more expensive, while the cost to eat in is increasing at a more moderate pace. And as usual, proteins saw the biggest increase. Again, this is a months long trend, longer than that, really, probably a years long trend now. So they went up over 6%, as opposed to cereals cereals and bakery products went up 1%, dairy 1.7%, fruits and vegetables went down 0.5%. That's always good for me. And non-alcoholic beverages went up 3%. Other food at home went up 1.4%. So if you're drinking non-alcoholic beverages like soda pop, juices, that sort of thing, and you're eating a protein-heavy diet, so you're likely experiencing higher food costs than would be typical throughout the country. But if you're eating a diet that's heavy in fruits and vegetables, that's at least a little bit offsetting some of the increase in meats, poultry, fish, and eggs. Now, I would bet that a lot of this increase is caused by egg prices, which continue to be high. They have not ameliorated yet. That hopefully will come later in the year, but we'll have to see. Okay, so that's the picture on food at home. Food in restaurants, so you can see that both went up. Food at full service restaurants and snacks went up 4.2%. Food away from home, limited service meals and snacks, like fast food restaurants, went at 3.5%. But you can see both went up pretty significantly. Okay, so eating at home is getting ever more expensive. On the energy front, so as has been the trend for quite a while now, energy commodities dropped 11.6%. Okay, this is again over a 12-month period. Energy services went up almost 7%, and the drop in this case was both fuel oil and gasoline. Okay, gasoline year over year has gone down 12%, whereas fuel oil has gone down 8.6%. And then energy services, you can see electricity's gone up 4.5%. Natural gas has gone up 15.3%. So if your home has both gas heating and cooking, you're likely seeing bigger increases. Now, a lot of electricity generation is powered by natural gas. And so one would imagine that one of the reasons why we're seeing electricity costs go up is because the cost of natural gas has gone up, which increases, again, the cost to generate electricity. And then finally, for non-food and energy, so you can see commodities have barely budged, really, at 0.3% increase. And services has gone up 3.6%. So commodities, what's really gone up? Well, tobacco products have gone up over 6%. So this is likely to be the long-term trend for tobacco products. As the as we head toward the end time of the tobacco settlement, I think that states are probably going to levy higher taxes on tobacco and smoking products to make up for the revenue that they were getting from the tobacco settlement. And so you're going to see the prices of tobacco products continue to increase because states want that revenue. Okay, alcoholic beverages went up 1.5%, relatively modest. Used cars and trucks went up 1.8%. Okay, apparel went down by almost 1%. New vehicles went down 0.4%. So I don't know why this is saying energy commodities. This is used cars and trucks. Yeah, went up 1.8%. Medical care basically unchanged. So you can see the big increases were in used cars and trucks and tobacco and alcoholic beverages, and the rest were pretty moderate. So and then services. Across the board, services, non-food and energy related services have gone up. So the cost of housing went up almost 4% year over year. Medical care 3%. Transportation services also close to 3%. So And almost we all need shelter. Most of us need at least some kind of medical care, even if it's only routine dental care, and transportation services. Again, most of us need that as well. So this increase is inescapable. Whereas to go back to commodities, whereas smoking is not essential, right? So if you're not a smoker, for example, and you're not buying a used car, so you may have experienced inflation a little bit lower than it is being reported nationwide. Okay, so that's the CPI. Now let's look at the consumer price index. I look at Los Angeles because that's the market in which I live, but you can always look up your local market by searching whatever place you live: Omaha, Nebraska CPI, Miami CPI, Dallas CPI, wherever it is that you live. Okay, and so here in California, area prices were up 0.1% over the past month, 3% from a year ago. So you can see that the year-over-year price increases in Los Angeles are higher than the national average. Okay, and the core inflation rate, less food and energy, in Los Angeles year over year went up 3.3%. Okay, so not only is California and Los Angeles in particular an expensive place to live, but it is the cost is going up faster than the nation as a whole, right? The core inflation rate for the country as a whole is 2.8%. Here in California, it's 3.3%, or here in Los Angeles, I should say, it's 3.3%. So a 0.5% higher in Los Angeles. And you say, well, it's only a 0.5%. Yes, but that's significant, right? If you're spending uh, uh, you know, if you're spending money for, if you're a lower income person, so you're spending an extra um, uh, um, 50 cents out of every $100 you spend more in Los Angeles than you would in another location. That's what I was trying to come up with there. Okay, food in Los Angeles. So food at home actually decreased 0.1% in Los Angeles, led by lower prices for meat, poultry, fish, and eggs, which went down 2.7%. So that's good news for Angelinos. And food away from home also declined 0.1%. Okay, so it's a little bit less expensive to eat in Los Angeles going from April to May. Hopefully that trend will continue. In terms of energy, so month over month, energy rose 0.1%, but gasoline prices decreased 1.4%. So a little bit of moderation in gasoline prices. Energy over year increased 1.9%, but gasoline prices have gone down almost 8% in Los Angeles. That's been a saving grace for those of us who drive. And then for all items, less food and energy, so they went up 0.2% in May. This was led by higher medical care costs, higher shelter costs. In contrast, prices for other goods and services went down 1.6%, and apparel went down 1.3%. Okay, now that's on a month-over-month basis. Now, on a year-over-year basis, again, the core inflation rate was up 3.3%, led by medical care going up almost 6%, shelter housing going up over 4%. Whereas the price for new and used cars went down a little over 1%, and education and communication went down 0.6%. So it's a mixed bag, but overall, as has been the trend now for quite a while, not only the prices are rising faster in Los Angeles than they are nationwide. Now there are likely Other locations where prices are rising slower than they are nationwide. And for those of you who live in those locations, lucky you, or good decision. Okay, now let's look at current and real earnings for employees. This is on private non-farm payrolls, seasonally adjusted. So you can see that from real average earnings per hour uh, went up 3 cents from going from April to May. And they went up, let's see, 55 and 74, about $1.30 per week. Okay, so a little bit of an increase. You can see that they went up 0.3% real average hourly earnings, and 0.3% also real weekly earnings went up 0.3% as well. Okay, the average weekly hours worked has stayed the same at 34.3 for quite a while. You can see it was that's what it was back in May 2024, and it's been that way the last 3 months as well. So yeah, okay. And so here we go. Let's see, what else do I want to look at here? Okay, year over year percentages. So, uh, um, real average weekly earnings that's adjusted for inflation have gone up 1.4 and 1.5% hourly and weekly. So there's been a little bit of gaining ground on inflation. Okay, and you can see that average hourly earnings. And average weekly earnings went up 3.9%. That's on a non-inflation adjusted basis. So, um, you know, things are doing better here than they were a year ago. And at least we're kind of barely keeping our heads ahead of inflation. Okay, and then next we're going to look at the unemployment rate. Okay, so the unemployment rate for May of this year, 4.2%. It's been at that for the last several months. Even in February, it was 4.1%. So there's really been no significant change in the unemployment rate since the beginning of the year. Let's see, January, I think it was. Yeah, it's 4% in January, so it's gone up 0.2% over the last 5 months. Not a particularly large change. Okay, for men 20 years and over, the unemployment rate in May was 3.9%. That's down 0.1%. So again, basically unchanged. And for women, the unemployment rate was also 3.9% last month. That's an increase from 3.7% in April, but still, these are very small changes, not having an appreciable impact on employment trends. Okay, now, and then for teenagers, so you can see that in May it went up to 13.4%. Up from 13% in April. As school gets done, more teens are entering potentially the summer job market looking for jobs. And so that would account for the increase in the teenage unemployment rate. Okay, and then by demographic, so the unemployment rate among white Americans in May, 3.8%, pretty much on par with the last several months. For Black Americans, in May, it was 6%, down from 6.3% in April. A bit of a change there. Okay, but it's since the beginning of the year, it's been 6.2, 6.3. So we're back down to its low point for 2025. And then for Asian Americans, so you can see it bumped up to 3.6% from last month, where it was 3%. So that's a significant increase, a 20% increase. Okay. And then finally, for Hispanics, Latinos, So it was the unemployment rate was 5.1% in May, and that's down from 5.2 in April. In February was 5.2, March it was 5.1. So it's been 5.1, 5.2 for the last several months. In January, though, it was 4.8. So there has been a bit of an increase since the beginning of the year in unemployment among Hispanics and Hispanic Latinos. Okay, next, as I always say, we need to look at the unemployment figures combined with the civilian labor force participation rate. Okay, so the labor force participation rate went down to 62.4% from 62.6%. So that would, in some ways, account for a lower inflation rate. It's not that more people found jobs, it's that fewer people were looking for jobs. And so that lowers the unemployment rate as well. Okay, among men 20 years and older, 70.1% are in the labor force. That's down from 70.3% in April. So you see that 0.2% drop showing up there. Among women, the labor force participation rate for May is 58.6%, down from 58.9, so a 0.3% drop among women. And then finally, among teenagers, there was a labor force participation rate drop from 36.9 to 36.2. Okay, so the increase in teenage unemployment did not come from teenagers entering the workforce. It came from fewer teenagers having jobs, even as teenagers are leaving the workforce. So that's not a good trend for teenagers. We'll have to see how that shapes up as we head into more of the summer. Okay, so now let's look again at demographics. Okay, so the labor force participation rate among white Americans dropped from 62.3% to 62%. So a significant drop. Among Black Americans, it dropped to 62% from 62.1%. So not really a statistically significant change there. For Asian Americans, it went from 66% in April to 65.9. Again, not statistically significant. And among Latinos, it went from 67.3 to 67.2. So again, not the significant change or the significant change in labor force participation really is among white Americans as opposed to Black Americans, Asian Americans, and Latino Americans. So, don't know why more white Americans are dropping out of the labor force. I can't even speculate on it, but that seems to be what the trend is. So, does that match your experience? That's something to think about. Okay, now let's look at unemployment by industry. Okay, and this is another long-term trend. Private education, we saw in May, seasonally adjusted 1 month net change. The largest is in private education and healthcare services, 87,000 new jobs. Next, followed by leisure with 48,000 new jobs, and then financial activities, 13,000 new jobs. Those were the three biggest gainers. The biggest losers were business and professional services that lost 18,000, manufacturing lost 8,000, and retail trade lost 6,500. It is interesting to note that overall, the government sector lost 1,000 jobs. We'll look into the details there. I suspect that we're still seeing job growth among local and state governments, but that's being offset by reduction in jobs at the federal level. Okay, so looking at healthcare, as has been the trend now for quite a long time, most of the job growth in this sector is in healthcare and social assistance. Okay. Most of the funding for these is driven by government spending, which, so you can see it continues to support these. There's only 8,700 new jobs in private education, but over 62,000 in healthcare and over 16,000 in social assistance. Okay, and you can see in healthcare, large growth in ambulatory healthcare services and hospitals, not as much in nursing and residential care facilities. Okay. And then in the next largest is in hospitality and leisure. So you can see in both arts and entertainment and recreation, job growth over 16,000, and in accommodation and food over 31,000. So, as has been again the long-term trend, performing arts, spectator sports has seen a big increase, 7,000. Museums, historical sites shrank. Again a long-time trend. And then amusement, gambling saw almost 10,000 new jobs. Okay, on the food and accommodation, so it's really food where we're seeing the big job growth, 30,000. Accommodations, only about 1,200 new jobs in May, so not a big source of growth there. And then finally, financial activities. So this is somewhat new. Financial activities has had kind of a mixed growth and shrink rate over the last year or so. So finance and insurance saw 8,400 new jobs, real estate, rental, and leasing over 4,000 new jobs, and you can see where they are. So central money authorities, central bank, actual a little bit of job losses, credit intermediation and related services, 1,200 jobs, securities, commodities, and such. There's about 2,000 new jobs in finance and insurance, 5,300. So pretty much with the exception of money center banks, job growth across the board there. And then looking at real estate, so you can see real estate and rental and leasing services saw increases. Lessors of non-financial intangible assets, this is like equipment leasing and such, I suspect no growth there, but real estate looks to be doing pretty well. Okay, on the job loss front, so professional and business services, big losses in administrative support and waste management. Businesses, I think, are tightening their belts. Okay, also loss of job decreases almost 2,000 in professional, scientific, and technical services. Management of companies and enterprises, though, saw almost 5,000 net jobs created in May. Okay, so compare that to, let's see, was this? Okay, so you can see administrative support, almost 22,000 jobs lost. So on the waste management side, there was actually a little bit of an increase. So businesses are definitely tightening their belts. This could also be due to the adoption of large language models and other AIs that are allowing people to be more efficient without administrative help. Okay, so that's business and professional services. Manufacturing, durable goods manufacturing dropped 7,000, and non-durable goods manufacturing dropped 1,000. This could be an outgrowth of the turmoil caused by the imposition of tariffs, okay, where there was a lot of reports of manufacturers not being able to get the raw materials that they needed because of what was going on, and so they had to scale back on manufacturing. Now you can see machinery manufacturing was one of the big losers, along with furniture and related, and miscellaneous manufacturing, and then non-mineral product manufacturing. Now, there were some gains. So primary metal manufacturing saw a little bit, fabricated metal and electrical equipment all saw gains of a little over 1,000 jobs each. But the real news here is machinery manufacturing dropped by over 7,000 jobs. That's really what caused the overall drop. In terms of non-durable goods, so food manufacturing actually went up, as did textiles, But other than that, you can see everything else was down. So everything from beverage, tobacco, and leather, plastics and rubbers, chemical, petroleum and coal, printing, paper, apparel, and textiles all went down. So the only bright picture in employment in non-durable goods manufacturing really is in food manufacturing. Okay. And then finally, retail trade. Okay, so you can see it's kind of mixed. So motor vehicle and parts saw a little bit, just a couple hundred job increase, whereas building material and garden equipment lost 2,600. Food and beverage retailers gained 500, but furniture, home furnishings, electronics dropped 1,400. The biggest loss was in health and personal care retailers, dropped 3,600 jobs. That was followed by building material and garden, lost 2,600, and then sporting equipment and such dropped 2,500 jobs. The biggest gainer was clothing. Now that's interesting because if you recall, the price of clothing has been decreasing year over year for quite some time, and yet the number of people employed is going up. This could be retailers trying to offset price decreases by increasing the volume of sales. Okay, now construction has been a perennial gainer. It did gain 4,000 jobs, and you can see that specialty trade contractors actually dropped, but construction of buildings is indeed up 6,700. So you see kind of these two offsetting each other. Okay, and you can see building both residential and non-residential increased. Okay, now let's look at government real quickly. Okay, so, and it's just as I predicted. Well, state governments were flat. Local governments hired 21,000 people, and the federal government basically let go 22,000 people. So one is offsetting the other, and you can see both for the Postal Service and the rest of the federal workforce, both of those dropped, whereas in state governments, so you can see state government education dropped, but that was offset by gains in all the other areas of state government services. So you can see 2,900 jobs dropped in education and picked up in non-education services. And then let's look at the local government scene. Okay, so local government. So it was local government education dropped 300 jobs. We are heading into the summer, so you're not going to see gains in education hiring. But really where the growth is almost 21,000 new jobs in local government, excluding education. So we'll probably continue to see this trend of essentially little to no job growth in government as the federal workforce contracts and local government workforces increase. Now, looking at the 12-month trend, so you can see that over the last year, there was a gain of over 24,000 jobs. I'm sorry, there was a gain in 270,000 jobs in government, but that's because the impact of the decrease in federal jobs was only for the last few months, and they were more than offset by increases in government jobs at the state and local level. And you can see that again, private education and healthcare services, almost 1 million new jobs year over year. You can see again, construction, 126,000 new jobs year over year. Manufacturing has been declining year over year, 88,000. I know it's a goal of the president to reinvigorate manufacturing, but that's a very difficult thing to do here in the United States, and we'll have to see how that plays out. Okay, so that's what's happening in various sectors, and if you're considering making a job change, that's something to look at closely to see where is there opportunity in areas where you have skills, experience, etc. Okay, now housing prices. So looking at California, The median sales price of a home in California, $859,000, down, roughly 0.1%. So essentially unchanged from the year over year. Okay. The number of homes sold, though, has dropped almost 9% year over year. Average median days on market, 31. That's up 5 year over year. Not a particularly significant change. Okay. And you can see this is a trend for all homes. Now, if we look at single family homes, excuse me, the median home price is higher, 906,500, as opposed to condominiums, where the median price is 655,000. Okay, so that's to be expected. Now, looking at supply, so the supply of homes in California has actually increased 16% year over year. And that's what's probably kept the overall median home price from really having any kind of significant increase. Okay, and then, okay, so homes sold above list price, 40.3%. That's down almost 10% year over year. And of course, that's homes sold with a price drop, 34.8%, an increase of over 10%. Homes sold at list price, no, that can't be right, 100%. Anyway, you can see that the momentum is shifting a little bit. So we're seeing more homes having to drop their prices to sell, and fewer homes sold above list price. And then finally, where are people moving from in the United States, and where are they moving to? Well, California is the most popular state for people to leave, followed by New York and Illinois and Washington. And then from there, you're looking at Virginia, Maryland, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and Connecticut, Indiana, Missouri, Nebraska, North Dakota, Nevada, and Colorado. Sorry, Utah and Colorado. Okay, so those are, and then where are they going to? Where they're going to Florida, Arizona, the Carolinas, both North and South, Tennessee, and Texas, and Idaho, and Maine are the most popular places for people to go to. Okay, and so you can see, where are people moving from between February and April of this year? Most people are leaving Los Angeles, New York, Seattle, San Francisco, Washington, D.C., Chicago, Philadelphia, Boston, Denver, and Hartford. Okay, although Denver and Hartford, we're talking, very small numbers here, but very significant numbers of people are leaving LA, New York, Seattle, San Francisco, Washington, D.C., and Chicago. Where are people moving to? Sacramento, Phoenix, Cape Coral, Florida, Orlando, Sarasota, Myrtle Beach, and Jacksonville. So you can see 1, 2, 3, 4 of the top destinations are in Florida, and then there is one in California. Sacramento is less expensive than most other major cities in California. Phoenix remains a popular destination, and Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, and Las Vegas. Okay, so you can see where people are going. Now let's see if we can find another market. Let's look at Omaha, Nebraska. Okay, so looking at a market very different from Los Angeles, Omaha, Nebraska. So the median sales price in Omaha, $282,000, up 2.5% year over year. Number of homes sold, 525, down 7%. Median days on market, 11. It's a very strong market. And particularly among single family homes, median days on market, 10. Okay. And but even among condominiums, very strong market. So Omaha, this is one of the ones I look at, typically on this show, just to give you a comparison. Okay, very, very hot market. Okay, and you can see how hot is it? It's an 85. Okay, let's compare that to California. Where's the market heat indicator for California? It's interesting. They don't even show it for California. So, I mean, California is still a strong market, but not nearly as hot um, as California. Okay, with 11-day turnaround. Okay, sale to list price is close to 100%. Homes sold above list price almost 40%. Homes sold with price drops about 34%. So the market is cooling a little bit year over year. Even in Omaha, but still remains very strong. Okay, and what's happening in the market? So people are moving to Omaha from Kansas City, Missouri, Washington, D.C., Los Angeles, Denver, San Francisco. You can see all the top cities that people are leaving. They're bringing in people. Omaha is gaining some of those locations. Okay, people are leaving Omaha for Milwaukee, Des Moines, Madison. Here you go, Cape Coral, Florida, Phoenix, Sarasota. So again, some of the top destinations for people to go to nationwide. You can see even from Omaha, people are going there. So again, a very strong market. Let's look at one more. Let's look at. Where's the thing? Here we go. Let's look at Sarasota. I usually look at Miami, but let's look at Sarasota, Florida, which is one of the top inbound markets. So you can see median sales price $499,000. That actually is a 15% drop year over year. Okay, median days on market up 10% year over year to 81. So although Sarasota is a top destination, it is cooling. Okay, and you can see how hot is it? 27. So it's not a hot market at all compared to Omaha. Okay, homes sold above list price only 5%, with price drops 32%, sale to list price 94%. Okay, so there is negotiating leverage in Sarasota. Okay, where are people moving to Sarasota from? Chicago, New York, Miami. They're probably looking for less expensive housing. Boston, Washington, D.C., Philadelphia, Los Angeles. So again, Sarasota is a top destination for the cities that people are leaving. Where are people leaving Sarasota for? It looks like primarily what would be less expensive markets. Knoxville and Johnson City, Tennessee, Jacksonville, Florida, Asheville, North Carolina, Gainesville, Florida, Homosassa Springs, Florida. I don't even know what that is, but you can see they're not leaving for the major cities. They're staying primarily in the Southeast. Even Maryland could technically be considered in the Southeast. Okay, so that gives you a picture of what's happening with housing in terms of for purchase housing. Now let's look at the rental housing market. Okay, and you can see that we're looking at median rent in select markets. So Phoenix is trending down, Los Angeles is trending up, Dallas is up, Orlando's flat, Miami's flat, San Diego's up. So you can see in general, California rents are going up, and in New York City rents are going up. But in other markets, they are either flat or declining, like Phoenix, Orlando, Miami, Atlanta, Georgia, and Houston, Texas. So formerly, strong markets where people are moving to them, they are ameliorating somewhat. Now that I think things are just slowing down overall. So let's look at Los Angeles in a little more depth. So you can see that the bulk of units available in Los Angeles are really in the 1,700 to 2,900 a month. And you can see the average rent is $2,750. That's up $15 month over month. You can see that rents have been trending down, but now in the last month, they're trending back up again. Okay, whereas they were relatively flat last year. And the market is warm. Okay, they're saying. Okay, and you can see for submarkets, Culver City is about flat. Ladera Heights continues to decline, whereas View Park, Windsor Hill is continuing to increase. Marina Del Rey is about flat, and Beverly Hills is continuing to increase. Okay, now let's go back and let's look at another market. Let's look at Miami. Okay, so Miami, similar range. Well, actually, yeah, about 1,700 to 3,800, but yeah, similar range to Los Angeles now. Interesting enough, however, and rents did increase $50 month over month. That's a pretty big increase. You can see that rents trended down the second half of last year and continued through February. And now they've been trending back up to the point where now they are getting closer to their peak last year. Their peak last year was about 3,300. They're now at about 3,200. So still $100 less, but getting closer. It'll be interesting to see what happens in July. Okay, the market temperature in Miami is cool nonetheless. And then let's see if I can get, let's look at Omaha. Oops. I'll learn how to spell. Okay, so Omaha, Nebraska, you can see most rents are $2,200 or less. A lot of units available starting at $700. So, however, big rent increase, $90 month over month. Average rent is $1,575. You can see that's a 6% or thereabouts increase. And you can see that rents last year trended up to about the $1,500 level and then started to decrease. They declined and they've gone up and down, but they stayed around $1,500 a month average rent. So it looks like we're not going to see declines back to the lower levels that they were at the first half of last year. Okay. The market temperature, though, is cool. So overall, it appears the rental market nationwide is cool. But nonetheless, you can see just like with for sale housing, rental housing in Omaha much more affordable than it is in other locations. So, and you can go to Zillow Rentals if you're thinking of moving. It's check it out. It's a great tool to use. Okay, the last thing we're going to look at is a survey of consumers. Okay, so index of consumer sentiment. This is a big turnaround here. You can see month over month change increased 16%. So the volatility of May, people are starting to leave that behind, and they're getting more optimistic. So you can see the index went up to 60.5 from 52.2. Current economic conditions also saw an 8% increase. Okay, month over month up to 63.7 from just slightly below 59. And the index of consumer expectations, which is one of the most important indicators, up almost 22%. People are much more optimistic now that the volatility from the tariffs seem to have sort of fallen out of the news cycle. Now you can see that there's still big changes year over year. Excuse me. So we're still below the index of consumer sentiment as of a year ago, and down 11% and down 16% in terms of consumer expectations from a year ago. But if the current trends continue, we may see those year over year declines erased as people become more optimistic. So now you can see, by the way, that these are consumer expectations, etc. This is for 2018 through 2020. They were, very high, and they dropped considerably after COVID. They started to come back up in late 2020, but as of 2021, they dropped to very low level. They went up and down, but did recover somewhat. And then they dropped again the first part of this year, but now they are headed back up again. So that's a consumer expectations do have a big impact on what actually happens, because people act in accordance with their expectations, and so that's a good sign. So among the good trends is year ahead inflation expectations dropped from 6.6% last month to 5.1% this month. That means people are less concerned about inflation. Okay. Long run inflation expectations fell for the second straight month, down just a tiny bit in June to 4.1% from 4.2%. But these are the lowest in 3 months. Okay. So we are seeing consumers being more optimistic, this month than they have been really since the start of the year, and that's a good sign for things going forward. So I don't know about you. I'm a little bit more comfortable now that some of the volatility has calmed down, and so am hoping that this trend will continue, and 2025 will turn out to be a good year. So that's what I've got for you on Economic Echoes. I hope you find this information useful. If you have any questions, comments, criticisms, my social media links will be in the show notes when this episode posts on LinkedIn. I mean, on YouTube. So feel free to drop them there. And let's see. Tomorrow at 5 p.m. is my every other week show, Jiggers' Place. We're going to sit back and have a cocktail and talk about the classic detective, Sherlock Holmes, and the man who wrote the Sherlock Holmes stories, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. So I invite you, as we head toward the end of the week, to relax with me tomorrow afternoon. And then on Sunday at 10 a.m. is a special edition of the Way to Wow show in honor of the anniversary of the establishment of the Pledge of Allegiance. So that'll be Sunday, June 22nd at 10 a.m. I hope you'll join me for that special show. And then next week, Monday at 10 a.m. Pacific time is my show, Trust and Estates Weekly. My guest is, here we go. My guest is Derek Keller. He's going to be talking about business exit planning. And then on Tuesday at 10 a.m., my guest is Darren Burrell, and he is an Air Force veteran turned venture capitalist. And so Darren is going to share the lessons that he learned from the military that he applies to his work as a venture capitalist. And then 1 week from today, we'll be back. I'll be back for the next edition of People Making Money. So I thank you very much for joining me. Wish you a wonderful rest of the day, and signing off, Marie, darling, you are my belle. Courage at all times, my friend.